hope we are doing well. In recent times, there has been a significant enthusiasm amongst investors and customers around environmental, social, and governance issues. So much so that it has become a common term in everyday business language. Worldwide, ESG issues continue to remain very significant and relevant in M&A transactions, and India is no different. Right from the inception of M&A transaction, throughout the due diligence process, during the negotiation of the transaction documents, up to closing and even post-closing, the ESG issues continue to be very much relevant in an M&A transaction. In the short video today, I will delve into certain key issues from an ESG standpoint which ought to be factored in while doing an M&A transaction. So please stay tuned. ESG issues definitely assume a lot of significance in Indian M&A context. Firstly, investors are increasingly favorably looking at companies who are ESG compliant, and therefore, if as a company you are ESG compliant, whether in terms of having robust anti-corruption policies, anti-money laundering policies, pro-employee policies, being environmentally sound, the chances of attracting good investors at great valuation is very high. For instance, a company which has poor environmental policies and is into manufacturing and therefore is vulnerable to a fire hazard which can cause accident in the factory, or has poor money laundering policies or anti-corruption policies, we really find it tough to attract good investors and at good valuation. Secondly, customers are also increasingly looking to do business with companies who are ESG compliant, and therefore if a company is ESG compliant, it gives you a significant competitive advantage. Lastly, even employees are again looking to really stick around with companies who are pro-employee in the outlook and policies, and therefore in order to attract and retain top talent, a company will be well advised to be ESG compliant and have pro-employee policies. While doing due diligence in M&A transaction, when you're focusing on ESG, there are certain key points to be taken note of. Firstly, customize and tailor the requisition list for diligence in accordance with the sector and the business operations of the target. Have it vetted and drawn up by an ESG expert. These are very important so that you can really focus in a proper way while doing the ESG diligence. Secondly, what is important is the aspects of greenwashing. You should definitely try and assess if the target is actually making a lot of tall claims about being ESG compliant, etc. But in actual practice is really not walking the talk. Thirdly, don't confine your diligence just to desktop review documents. Do definitely do on-site visits so that issues like oil spillage can be determined as well. Last but not least, because of this focus on ESG diligence, this will prolong your transaction timelines, and therefore as investor, when you're looking to negotiate your term sheet and exclusivity period, do factor this timeline in your exclusivity period so that you can meaningfully do a ESG diligence. Once the ESG issues are assessed during the due diligence process, it's time to integrate the findings into the definitive agreements. Broadly customize your representations, warranties, and indemnities, and a whole risk allocation package to factor in these findings and in any risks which can be mitigated by these contractual protections. For instance, you can always have a specific indemnity to address a specific non-compliance, or for that matter, treat anti-corruption warranties or anti-money laundering warranties in a separate footing and have extended indemnity periods and heightened caps to insulate yourself better. The other key factor is if you have constructs like earn-out, etc., and there are contingent payouts, and if there is a critical warranty being breached like anti-corruption, then reserve the right to suspend or terminate those payouts if those issues turn out to be true. Last but not the least, if there are material issues from diligence around ESG, try and look at this transaction structurally and holistically if it needs to be amended. For instance, introduce a holdback in order to appropriately mitigate the risks. ESG regime is very much relevant and applicable both to listed companies and unlisted public and private limited companies. Of course, for listed companies, the regime is a bit more stringent, understandably so. For instance, SEBI requires top 1,000 listed companies by market capitalization to submit a comprehensive report known as the BRSR report, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report. Insofar as public and private companies are concerned, and all other companies really, you have to comply with several laws which fall in the ESG bracket. For instance, there are certain companies who have to comply with the corporate social responsibility norms under Companies Act 2013. Of course, there are a plethora of environmental laws and labor laws which has to be complied with, and other laws in connection with money laundering and anti-corruption, etc. So it's really important that you comply with all this, and even voluntarily, as I mentioned at the outset, the investors and customers are looking at companies who are voluntarily adopting these standards, and therefore a company will really do well to comply with these norms, even though not strictly applicable in some cases. To sum up, ESG assumes a lot of significance in Indian M&A context. Firstly, customers, investors, employees all want to be associated with companies who are ESG compliant, and therefore it's very important that in order to give yourself a competitive advantage, attract good investors with great valuation, you kind of be ESG compliant. Secondly, from a diligence standpoint, it's very important that you don't just confine yourself to desktop review, but do on-site diligence, customize your requisition list as per the scope and scale of the business of the company, and watch out for issues like oil spillage, greenwashing, and buy additional time to do a meaningfully holistic ESG diligence. Once the diligence is complete, then you transform those findings into the definitive agreements appropriately so that you have a reasonably well beefed up risk allocation package as a buyer. Last but not the least, when it comes to the ESG regime, it's applicable not only to public listed companies, but also private companies and unlisted public companies. And therefore, care should be taken to adhere to this, and even voluntarily, given the whole outlook of investors, customers, employees, it's better to really voluntarily be compliant with these norms. I hope you found this video useful. Should you have any questions on this topic or otherwise, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you very much for sparing your time to watch this.